guys, so hopefully you have hit the like and subscribe button and possibly given us some feedback on our part one with Sarah, who has written a article called China Lied, People Died, and the Left Complied. I interviewed her because I feel like she had the heart to really tell us about how to protect our families when it comes to what's in the media, and how to understand how the Chinese Communist Party or the CCP handled the virus. And I think that's important because history is trying to be changed by the CCP, unfortunately. And so I think all of that's important for our families. So it is kind of a more serious topic that you may want to put your earbuds on for the younger listeners around to protect your household. So because it is unfortunately it's a dark thing that's going on in our world today. It's very serious. So but with no further ado, this is part two. Welcome back, Sarah.
Thank you for having me again.
Yeah, of course. Love talking to you this last time. So I wanted to go over something first here for our listeners. You seem to be, criticizing the Chinese communist regime, but you're not criticizing the Chinese people, right?
No, not at all.
Not with this.
I had a really good life living in China, and that was largely in part because of the Chinese people. They were very kind, very helpful. If I was out in public and I was lost, it was really easy for someone to assist me. If I was in the market and I could not translate what I wanted, there was always someone around who would help. I was also heavily pregnant at the end of my time there, and my neighbors were so great.
Wow.
My neighbors would take my kids to the bus stop to go to school so that I could just stay home and rest. They bought my baby gifts, at the end.
Really?
Yeah. And when I was out with my kids, like with my whole family, Chinese people they'll give you gifts just because you're a foreigner, because it's their way of sharing their culture with you. They want you to have a little piece. They're very proud of their culture and they want to share it with people. And it's nice. They are just very kind and warm people.
Well, what was it? What was it they gave you?
So my kids got a toy, just outside of the toy store one, and I felt kind of bad because I thought the guy had bought it for his son or something. He just gave it to my kids. I have another friend.
Was it something that you could get here or only there?
Yeah, it's just kind of plastic, you can get it anywhere.
Okay. So the intention was
the intention
was the traditional culture, giving a gift to someone. Okay.
Yeah, my friends have all been gifted some form of tea or a really nice tea set by neighbors and just people that you know. I had one friend who a little boy gave her son some Chinese money, and at first they didn't understand. They thought maybe it was a scam or something, but they realized he just wants to give you a little piece of China so that he just wants to share their culture with them. But it's nice. But
that's cool.
The one part of the Chinese that really surprised me is that they're really affectionate towards children. And because I have 3, and that's obviously not standard in China, every time I go out, they go, 3 kids, good job. And after I had my baby, when you go back to the hospital and just to make sure that you've healed correctly, the last thing my doctor said was, okay, well, you're healed now, so you can go have another kid now, have another baby. And I just found that fondness that they have for children was really surprising and heartwarming, because obviously they don't have the opportunity to have a large family. There was the one-child policy for so long. In 2015, they changed it to the 2-child policy. And just, if that was me, if I were in their position, I would feel so much more resentful to someone that had that opportunity, especially a foreigner in my own country. You can have however many babies you want, and I can't. But they weren't like that at all. They were just nice and warm, and they were very kind people, and that's why it just makes me really angry about how they're treated by their own government, and even worse, how our media, who is on the relentless search for victims, says nothing about this.
Right.
I mean, they could not care less. I mean, there's 1 billion people in China completely enslaved by the CCP. There's no freedom of speech. You know, you can't criticize the government. There's no dissent. You can be jailed and tortured for just being the wrong religion. You can be disappeared, like a lot of the journalists and the doctors who tried to blow the whistle on the virus. You know, a lot of the goods that come out of China are made through slave labor. That's how we're getting everything so cheap. Because again, it's
right.
There's a lot of poverty still in China. I know it's portrayed to be, you know, pulling themselves out of poverty, picking themselves up by their bootstraps and that kind of thing. In reality, it is still quite poor, and there isn't a lot of economic mobility. There is a lot of economic mobility in Eastern China, where lots of the cities are, and that's where it's really wealthy, but not so much in Western China, where it's really poor and agrarian still. It's just overall, it's just a sad situation, because the only thing that matters in China is the Communist Party. It doesn't, they will get rid of anyone,
Right.
they will do anything. All that matters is the state. And eventually our lives are going to go back to normal somewhat, and this virus is going to pass. But that's not going to change the situation in China. The Chinese people will still be stuck under a despotic Chinese Communist Party.
Yeah, there seems to be a lot of problems already in China because of the regime there. And they weren't ever really discussed much either in the Western media.
No, not nearly enough. The Western media totally placates the Chinese Communist Party. In the West, most people know about sort of the forced abortions that happen in China, or the sterilization, so that people can't have more than 2 children or 1 child. And there's been quite a bit of coverage on the Uyghur Muslims that are in concentration camps. But you know, what's less known about China is there's rampant child trafficking. There's a lot of kidnapping. Epoch Times was just reporting the other day that they basically found women who are basically reproductive slaves, and they just are impregnated, and then their children are sold. There was also the organ harvesting of the Falun Gong practitioners few weeks ago. I only had just learned about this. If anyone needs a good source, the Guardian actually published an article about it just last summer. Again, just gross human rights violations that were happening.
Yeah, there's actually. Well, I was just going to interject that there is a website that I'm aware of. It's called Doctors Against Forced Organ Harvesting.org. That gives information if anybody wants to help raise awareness of that. That's run by the state in China, the whole state, not just by some punks that you might read about or something about stealing organs, but it's a state enterprise.
Okay.
There. Pretty awful. So it seems like we're living in a time of where the people in the West are accusing our leaders of being a Hitler or a Nazi, and at the same time, the Chinese Communist Party is the real modern day Hitler. Don't you think?
Oh, precisely. It's the gross human rights abuses long before this virus ever came about. Just the general portrayal of Chinese society by the Western media is a total farce. You know, China is portrayed as a sophisticated first world nation, and it is not that. It strictly is not. There is so much poverty, so much corruption, so much slave labor. If you live in the wealthy eastern part, your life is good. But as a whole, China is not a first world country. Like I said, living conditions are really unsanitary. Water is still rationed in many parts of the country. There's corruption at the highest levels of government on down. And again, this isn't to say that our country is perfect. We have a lot of our own problems, but our problems are front and center in the news all the time. And we are constantly self-criticizing our own country and our own leaders, and we're looking at bad behavior and chastising it in public. But that's not what happens in China. No one in China can say anything, and the people that can say anything in the West don't care to say anything. It's just not what it is portrayed to be.
Well, that wraps up episode 2, part A. And don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Let us know what you think about all of this. It's a new world, folks. We got to take it on because we have families to take care of. Thanks, and see you next time.